Hey, all right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Mission Briefing. I'm super happy to be back. I was actually here earlier today. I don't know if you caught the stream earlier today, but it was fun. We covered setting up a federation in Apollo Studio, aptly renamed. Yes. But I am very excited to have with us again Michael Compton. Thank you for joining us from Dgraph. I don't I don't know if anyone was here for the stream before, but we took a look at, and I'll let Michael explain more about what Dgraph is for anyone who isn't familiar. But I was very blown away, very cool. I'll let him give you the deets. But yeah, I'm super excited to have him back on because they have now an online offering, which even more amazing. So yeah, just I'm excited to hear about Dgraph, a little catch up, and how you've been doing, and slash GraphQL and all this. Yeah, I guess I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be back. Just quickly, I've just realized you're not sharing with me.
Oh, that's a
So
good call. Yeah, here, let me fix that real quick.
I can't see,
Yeah, you
I
can't
can't
see
keep an eye on what
what's
you're
going on.
doing.
Yeah. I'm, here we go. Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah,
There we
that's it.
go.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So not
Yeah,
much yet.
so
Just Dgraph's website. I haven't, no secret codes or anything.
so I was here, how long was that? 3 weeks ago? I think it was
hmm
3 weeks ago.
Yeah, about
Something
three
like that.
weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought what we'd do today is we just review a little bit about what we did, and we kind of half wrote a little app last time. And
Yeah.
so I thought we might get that app going on our cloud offering
Oh yeah.
and play around a little bit with authorization. So in Dgraph, you
Yes.
can, we have a sort of GraphQL native way of describing what the authorization rules are in your graph, and then you get, you get permissions and whatever on what objects you can access in the graph, who can see what, and that works really nicely. I think we did a to-do app last time, and so
Yeah.
if there's multiple users, I might be able to only see my to-dos and you can only see your to-dos. And we could even do something like, you can share to-dos with other people. So you can only see them if they're yours or if they're shared
What?
or, that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So you set up
That,
all kinds of cool rules in your graph.
that's awesome.
But given that it was 3 weeks ago, I guess we should talk quickly about what Dgraph is again. And
I
if
agree.
there's people on the call who weren't on the last call. So should we do that, do you reckon? Like if I give a 5 minute talk or
Oh, I
something,
think that's
5 minutes of
perfect.
intro?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, I like hearing about it again. I could use a refresher. It,
So I guess the important thing about Dgraph is that it's like the Dgraph Labs company builds Dgraph from the disk all the way up. So it's a native graph database focused around GraphQL. So the story I told last time was around that Dgraph came into existence at about the same time that GraphQL became public, and our founder picked up GraphQL as the native query language for the database. So even though GraphQL itself is kind of targeted as not as a graph database query language, but as like a language for APIs. It's got some nice characteristics as a
yeah,
database language as well. So I mentioned things like that the structure of the query is representative of the structure of the graph,
yeah,
and the result structure is exactly the way you want to consume it. You just sort of the worst you've got to do is deserialize it with a JSON library. And there's a few other nice things in there that around directives and things that make it a really nice extensible language as a graph query language. So that's how it ended up as Dgraph's query language. And so what Dgraph builds is the graph database, a disk layer, and the graph database can be exposed in sort of two different ways. One way is what we call GraphQL plus minus, which is an extension of GraphQL. It's got some other features that you can't really do in GraphQL. So things like kind of like joins and things. You can
hmm
kind of have variables and join different parts of your graph and do a few fun things. And then there's the native GraphQL part, which exposes spec compliant GraphQL. So you can just sort of define your database as a set of GraphQL types. I want to-dos and authors, and they're linked in this
yeah,
way. And then just get going with all the usual GraphQL tools, and even just put something like Apollo client on top, or um,
whatever
I guess
client.
you did the street, or it'd be fun to put in a federation or something with other things. So there's all
Yeah,
kinds of stuff you can do just because it's sort of natively GraphQL. And so the way you start building an app with Dgraph is just by defining a set of GraphQL types. So you never have to go from Dgraph down into another piece of tech stack. You don't have to worry about columns and rows or translating between one representation of your data and another representation of your data.
Yeah.
If your data is about a graph, you define that graph as your data model for the app, and that's where you live the whole time that you're designing your app. So that's kind of that's what we worked at last time on the stream, was just this idea that you just kind of stay in your GraphQL world the whole time. You don't have to leave and go somewhere else. You don't have to think about, how does this bit in my data model translate to this bit in my app. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it blew me away last time when we're just setting everything up, how quick and easy it is to get from defining a schema to having a running database, using GraphQL to not as like an abstraction, but to query the database is very interesting. Auth was very cool. I'm excited to dig deeper into that. Yeah, and I'm all Samurai Pizza. Thank you for the follow. And I'm always interested when something like a database gets a hosted solution, because honestly, I don't like to manage the infrastructure for my databases. It's not something I consider to be fun. I'm sure there are people who do. It's just not me. Whoa, followers are just dropping in. Thank you, everyone. But yeah, I am super excited to dig deeper into slash GraphQL because yeah, I really like Dgraph and I really like the idea of it being hosted for me. So yeah, let's. I guess maybe the first step would be to kind of open up the code, look at where we were. I guess maybe left off.
Yeah. So, and then we'll just look at where we were, and then we'll just talk a bit about what the hosted offering
Yeah.
is, and then we should be able to just hook up our. So last time we ran just in Docker locally,
Yep.
and we should be able to hook that up to the hosted version just by changing the URL that we're pointing it at, basically. So, and that's the kind of developer experience we want with our hosted version, is that when you're developing on your local dev machine, you might have Dgraph running in a Docker container, and then when you push it to your test environment or production or whatever, it's exactly the same thing. Just you don't have to manage it in the cloud.
Oh, that's amazing.
So you don't have to make any changes to your app or anything. It's all the same. Oh, this is where we were. Okay. I have to cast my mind back a couple of weeks here.
I know. So hang on. So yeah, what we had going was our create React app, right? Oh, right. But we chose to do it TypeScript. Remember? It was a TypeScript app.
Somehow the sharing failed and that didn't really work for me, but that's okay. I think in the end we just went with non-TypeScripty things. That's okay.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, we were having issues, and we basically just did TypeScript with any to get things going. That's right.
TypeScript.
Okay, cool. So, well, the first thing is, should we try the VS Code live share? Do you think? I think for right now, while we go through this, we can just kind of go through what we've got going on, and then we can share later when we get into like more code heavy stuff. So, I was running. So actually, let me go ahead and just open this. Where's Kite? I thought I could get to Kitematic from here, but I guess not. All right. So Kitematic is a UI for running Docker containers. So if I bring this back over here, we have the standalone latest. This is actually, I didn't rename it, but this is Dgraph. So I can just start this. Now it's running.
Yeah.
And it's got our to-dos, and it's got, it's got our users.
Where we were. Yeah, it did. Okay. Oh, cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So we're just restarting the same image we had before, essentially.
Yep. So.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. So I'll have to actually confirm the port.
Yeah, get the port right.
Yeah, I want to make sure that is still the same. Oh wait, no, that was. Here we go. Yeah. So the port's going to be the same.
769.
Yep. 32769.
Easy. Cool. So it should just run.
Yeah. So this should basically just run. So let's start it up. But long story short is, even though we're talking to a database, we're doing it through GraphQL. So we could just use Apollo client. Like you could just use any GraphQL client that you want. You could use, I think one's called React Query or something like that. And then you've got Urkel, and then you've got like a couple other ones. But yeah, either way,
Not just for UI stuff though. I mean, I'm
yeah.
a bit of a believer that GraphQL actually works pretty nicely as middleware stuff as well.
Oh,
So
I
there's all
agree.
the language client libraries that you could use if your Dgraph was in your middleware and being accessed by another component in your middleware. And you get, I mean, the
Absolutely.
reason I think you get all the same fun stuff you get from the front end is that you get, you get typed data. You don't have to write code to access the bits. You don't have to go, I want to get the author and then the author's to-dos and things. You can just write a graph query across the bits you want, and then you can just deserialize it into JSON and you're away. So as a way to access a piece of middleware, it's actually pretty reasonably nice as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like it's not just for the client, but it's nice that a client can just grab onto this
And any
and
client,
run.
yeah.
Yeah, any client, exactly. Yep. Okay. So very cool. So we've got this. Yeah, let's just get it started and see what
See what happens.
happens.
So hopefully, yeah, if we just started the same container, we should still have the data we had from last time and
Yeah,
the schema last time. We'll go through the schema again in a second. Let's see if we can get it started
for
and go
sure.
through.
I just want to go to. Okay, so it's npm run start. Oh, we use yarn start. There we go. All right, so we'll see what happens. Terminal app. And Google Chrome app. Yeah, sure. How about it? Yeah, why not?
That's the usual process, yes.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah,
yeah,
thanks,
yeah.
Mac. Look at that.
All right, so we had two to-dos. One of them was completed, one of them wasn't done, and then we can tick them off or not. So this was
Yep.
a pretty simple little React component that just laid out a list based on a GraphQL query. So maybe we should drop into the code and just review that. So the first thing would probably be the schema. Yeah.
Let me make this a bit smaller.
So the Dgraph schema here is just
Wow.
GraphQL. So if you think about our app, well, eventually it's going to have users, and users are going to have lists of to-dos, and we might iterate on that and expand as we go into production, Kurt, and really corner the to-do
Oh
market.
man, we are gonna. Oh, I have plans.
Yeah. But basically, if you're thinking about this app, you're thinking about in terms of a graph. You think about a user is a node. So Kurt, the user, will be a node in the graph, and then Kurt will have edges to other nodes in the graph. So Kurt might have edges to Kurt's friends, and also to all the to-dos that Kurt has currently got, and maybe to other things as the graph expands. And so at the moment, our graph is pretty simple because it'll just be Kurt, and Kurt's got a list of two to-dos.
Yeah.
Simple, but as our app expands, that graph becomes more complex, and you can start to do more complicated queries and render your UI through more complicated searches across that graph.
For sure.
So at the moment, and the way you describe that in Dgraph is just as types in GraphQL. So here we've got two types: users and to-dos. Users have just got a username, which is a string. To-dos, they've got a list of the to-dos that they're currently doing, which is a list of the other type to-dos, and to-dos have just got a description, whether they're completed, and the user who's looking after them. The directives here are how we tell Dgraph what we want to do with the API. So the types themselves just tell us about the structure of the graph, and the directives tell Dgraph about how to treat that when building an API out of it. So for example, the one you've got highlighted at the moment, that the search on the completed thing tells Dgraph we want to be able to search on our to-dos based on whether they're completed or not. So I want to, when I search for to-dos, I want to be able to go, find me all the to-dos that are completed, or find me all the to-dos that are not completed. For example, we could also, let's add another one where it says description string on line 8. Let's go at search, because we can do text searches, and there's a bracket, and then by is the argument, just by colon, and it takes a list of things. And there's all kinds of search options we could add. And let's just go term, because that's a
you say term?
just in lowercase letters. So that would then say, I want Dgraph to build the GraphQL API for this to include the ability to search on descriptions by terms. So then I could go find me all the to-dos that have the word GraphQL in them, or find me all the words that have something else. So that'll indicate to Dgraph how to index the underlying data and what excuse me what query to build into the GraphQL query type when we build a full-on GraphQL API from this.
Awesome.
The other two interesting there, to-dos have got an ID, capital letter ID type, which is the GraphQL scalar one, whereas users have got a different kind of ID, which is a string external ID. So to-dos are just going to get a ID managed by Dgraph, whereas users are going to get the username as an ID coming in from externally. So the ID is going to be Kurt or Michael or whatever else. So that's we just manage that as a unique string ID in the database. Boom. And the last directive there is the has inverse one, which tells Dgraph that link between to-dos and users, the user who made the to-do, is a bidirectional edge. So that tells Dgraph to manage this like a two-way edge. It's not two distinct edges. It's just the one edge going back and forward there. You could think, for example, there are situations where that edge might be a one-way edge rather than a two-way edge. In this case, we're saying this one's a two-way edge. So that's all we need though to get. So last time we pumped that into Dgraph, and then from there we just started adding queries and mutations. I think we used Insomnia last time, didn't we?
That's right. I think we used Insomnia first just to like add some to-dos and stuff, and then I believe we finished up in here. We copied over the code from Insomnia, and then just actually added that functionality into our actual to-dos. And again, this is just a UL, and we're just taking the user's to-dos, mapping over them, and creating list items. Very simple.
Maybe we create a GraphQL query. I think we just scrolled past it, and then we did a use mutation book, didn't we? Is that what we did?
Yep.
Yeah, we did the query, which just grabs all the to-dos, all of Michael's to-dos in this case. Yeah, and then we have a mutation one to set whether it was completed or not based on that button.
And then So here we have our mutate function. We have our use query. So that's going to get the data. Boop, boop, boop. Yeah, that's right. So we had one user, I guess, which was you.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So what we could. Yeah. So I think what we basically did here was we set up the schema in Dgraph, and then we started writing a little UI that sits on top, which is like it's kind of the fastest way you can get from nothing to a running app with GraphQL, right?
Yeah.
All you had to do was write about 10 lines of schema, 11 lines of schema, and
so fast.
You're away in Apollo client. So I guess what we could do today is deploy an instance in /GraphQL, and then point this app there.
Yeah.
And then we can, then we'll be running it on the cloud version rather than the local version, which is cool. And we don't have to manage any infrastructure or anything when we go from local development deployments. And then we might have a chat about how to, because this app has got users, and Kurt doesn't want me seeing all of his to-dos.
No.
Let's add some auth on top of this so that we can shut that down.
I love it. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, cool. So I think the first step is we need our schema in /GraphQL, right? Or like we need to create a database.
So let's just, maybe I should give another 2 seconds about what /GraphQL is.
That's a good
call. This is the hosted environment for Dgraph. So basically you get Dgraph instances that we spin up in Kubernetes, and you get sort of the Dgraph experience, but without any of the management. So you basically just spin up a backend, spin up a Dgraph instance. You can then add a schema, add your data. You can do all the stuff you can do with a local Dgraph instance, like adding, sort of extending it with auth and extending it with custom logic and all that kind of stuff. But you just don't have to manage it. It's just one click and you're away.
That's great.
little problem here that we might run into is I'm pretty sure your account is only allowed to deploy one instance
Well,
because
I
this
think,
is a
yeah. I think that's okay though because I have this one, but I'm not like actually using it for anything yet. Like
okay.
I don't
Oh,
even
cool.
have.
Okay.
Oh, maybe I do. Maybe I have to enter the API key to get
If
this schema.
yeah, we won't tell you unless you enter the API key. I guess what we could do if you're not using it, we could just delete it and take it from the start so people can just see what
That's a great
the process
idea.
is.
Let's do that.
So if you go to settings down the bottom
Oop,
on the left hand side,
right here.
yep, you can just delete your deployment. Yep.
Cool.
It's gone. Okay, so now you're at the starting state. You can create a new deployment. I'd like to say one click, but it's 2 clicks. You've got to click create deployment, and then you've got to add some details and click create.
Still,
So
two
you
click is
basically
good.
just deploy name, and when you've got multiple deployments, you'll be able to do them. Can I just do one thing though? How much do we care? The next screen when you click create deployment is going to have the URL of the database and the API key. Do we care?
If people see the API key.
Well, the only thing I worry about is on the stream if someone else comes in and modifies the data while we're streaming or something.
I think we're okay there. I think if that happens, we'll stop it, create a new one off screen, and then like shame on you, whoever did it.
So
I think we're okay. But normally stuff like that would happen post, like people find it on YouTube or something. But yeah.
And we could just tear it down.
Exactly.
Different URL and different API.
Exactly. So I think we're okay for now. If you start messing with this data, just know I'll be very upset with you. Cool.
So it's now spinning your Dgraph instance. You get an API key, which you can save somewhere in the background. So the API key is about managing the instance, not about accessing the data. So what you're going to get out of this instance is 2 endpoints. One endpoint is the endpoint that you can send clients to,
right?
And the other endpoint is your admin endpoint that you're going to use to set the schema and whatever else. And that's what you need the API for. In this instance, we'll get into how we lock down the client endpoint in a second.
Okay.
So this will take 20 or 30 seconds to spin up.
Yep.
Once everything's done, there we go. Easy. We can click the pink button at the bottom, which is create our schema. And I think in this instance, when you go straight from here,
cool.
We copied that because otherwise it's annoying. But you may need it for later on.
Well, I did copy it.
We can paste the schema directly from the previous app into here.
Boom.
Update the schema.
Cool.
Done. And so now that's there. So now there's a couple of ways we can access this. We've got a little Explorer here, which is just a graphical embedded in the page, but you can still just access it with Insomnia or whatever else you like.
Yeah, I feel like for right now, I think we're okay here in API Explorer. Might as well stay within / or unless we're gonna ready to update the app and see what happens there.
Well, there'll be no data, right? Because this is a new data instance. If we point the app out, we just get a blank screen. So I guess the first thing to do is add some data.
Ooh, okay.
I can copy you in a mutation, but I think I tried just before the call to write a quick mutation that would work, but I didn't remember exactly what the schema looked like. So I might have had the field names wrong.
I think we could probably just do it. Yeah, let's just do it.
Yeah.
Add to-dos. And then that's going to take an input. Oh, well, that's wrong line.
Put brackets, yeah.
Yeah. So here, then we need add to do. And then this is going to take an input.
Yeah. And the input will be a list of to-dos. So we need a list, and then we're going to put objects, a bunch of objects.
That's right.
And the fun stuff about Dgraph here is that we can kind of go deep with this mutation. So we're adding a to-do, we're going to need to add authors. We're going to need to attach to-dos to authors because our schema said that a to-do has to have an author.
Yeah.
So was a description or something?
So we have description and completed. and then
and you
and user, but that will get attached for us. And then a user
and, the,
has a username, so that's all they have to have.
and we're going to find out something else fun here, I think, when we do it. So let's just start typing, and we'll find out the fun things.
Ooh, okay, I like this. All right, so let's just say like description. Um, oh wait, this has to be within quotes as well, right? Or am I making
No,
that
no,
up?
not in, no, not in.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, description
If it was a
completed.
JSON object, it would inside here.
Well, technically that's still false because we're not done yet.
Tick it off in the UI in a minute.
Yeah.
And then we need an author.
Is that here where we
So
do that?
yeah, so add the user. So a user is an object, right? And the
Yeah.
user's got a username, and the username's going to be Kurt or something. Okay, so what we've described is one to-do object. It's got a description, it's got a completed, it's got a user who's called Kurt. But and what's going to happen under the hood here is Dgraph is going to create that to-do. So it's going to create a node in the graph for the to-do. But because we said that usernames are IDs, it's going to look in its database of users and go, oh, there's no Kurt. So I need to create a Kurt to link this to-do to. So it's going to create both the to-do and Kurt and link them together.
So cool.
But we can actually go further because
Yeah.
that was a list of tasks. Let's just add another task as well. So we can just put a comma there and add another to-do and change the description and whatever else. And this one will still work even though, you can leave Kurt there.
I'll leave Kurt?
Let's just leave Kurt for a second.
Okay.
Because Dgraph's smart enough under the hood to go, oh, I'm creating create Kurt once, and I'll create two to-dos and link them to Kurt. So this mutation won't create two Kurts or anything. It's going to realize that username's a unique ID. I only need to create one Kurt.
Interesting.
So you'll get 3 nodes. So let's add another to-do and give Michael a to-do as well. So we've got 2 users here.
That is awesome that it will dedupe for you. That's so cool. Okay. Oh, go ahead. Were you saying something?
Give Michael a task.
Yeah, you got it.
Michael. Yep. You better change my username. So now we're going to create, how many nodes are we going to create here? We're going to create Michael, we're going to create 1 node for Michael, 1 node for Kurt, and 3 to do. So we'll create 5 nodes in the graph in this one mutation, and then you're going to get back a result that's got the description, whether it's completed or not, the user and the username. Yeah,
Wild.
so you should be able to
look at that.
Those red squiggles. There we go.
Look at how fast that was. So fast.
So now we could go back and we could query this from a number of different angles now. So for example, we could go and query it by user,
or all.
We could query for one Michael to-dos. We could query all the to-dos, and because we put an index on whether they were completed or not, we could just find the completed to-dos. We also put an index on the text, so we could search for the to-dos that mention Dgraph, or So that's basically what we don't have that many types, so we can't do that many searches.
Yeah.
But
that's a lot of stuff already, though, for like all of 3 minutes of work. Like that's
So if you think about UI now, like if you were building a UI on top of this already, you could have a UI that's got some buttons where you could enter a search term to filter your to-dos, or filter them, toggle them so you're only seeing the completed or the not completed, or whatever else. So you've already got a whole bunch of power that you can just add into your UI straight away.
The ability to create the relationships on the fly in the mutations as well, like the related entities, is huge. Because
and the reason that's there is so that you can serialize your client-side data and not have to write code on the client side to push the data into Dgraph. I think I said last time that one of the really cool things about GraphQL is that you don't have to write code to get all the things you want. You don't have to hit the REST endpoint for user and then go and hit the REST endpoint for all of their to-dos. You just write one query. It's a sort of declarative query, and you get it back. And we're trying to push that the other way as well, is that when you've got your object client side and you want to save it, you don't have to write some code that unpacks it and, adds it one object at a time and adds all the links. You just serialize it and send it to us, and you get the right graph model.
Yeah, and even in a GraphQL world currently, it's generally not as easy. Most GraphQL APIs aren't set up to handle these kind of like deep creations. Because it also, because Dgraph is working at the database layer, but this brings into other questions, which is like maybe transactions are important for a certain scenario. Like you're trying to charge someone and create an account and do all this stuff, but you want to fail out if one single step happens and not do any of the others, right? Like, and that gets very hard to do, to organize, one, between your teams, and two, just like deciding where that logic should live. Should it be multiple mutations from the client that happen? Is that responsible there? Or should it be one mutation that's smart enough to know how to do all those operations on the server? It's just a lot of unknowns. And with this, you don't have to worry about any of it. You just do it, and it works.
Yeah, there are actually options for pulling apart those transactions as well, though. So you can actually, you can control how transactions are running here. So because it's a database, right? Yeah. It's a database do transactions. You can just let it do its thing, or let it control it. It can have more control over the transactions as well.
So cool.
Alrighty, and we can see actually one other thing I should highlight is that down the bottom in the extensions of the result tab, it actually tells you how much this cost you in your hosted instance. It cost you one credit to run this, and it tells you how much stuff it touched in the graph while it was building this result, which turns out to be more than the number of nodes, because it actually has to touch nodes sometimes two times just to work out it's hooking everything up correctly. So sometimes the number of touched UIDs will be more than you expected, but that's just because it's got to sort of visit things a few times to hook everything up right.
Yeah. If anybody would like to try this out and follow us along, I just dropped a link. I completely forgot to do this before when we started. So this will give you credits to /GraphQL, so you can follow the link and claim some credits, and try this out for yourself. You should absolutely do that. Okay, cool. Sorry about that derailment. I just didn't want to get too much further, and I had already forgotten. So.
Right? We've done the wow moment, and you've dropped the dropped the link.
There we go. It was all planned.
Yeah, that's what we organized before, right?
Yeah. All right, cool. So we've got some data here now in our hosted version. Should we switch? I don't know what will happen on the client. I think this will still work. Oh, Icewater, hey, thank you for the follow. And also thank you for the comment. Yeah, Dgraph is really cool. I'm pretty hyped on it myself. Yeah. Should we flip over the client to use our new?
We'll need to grab the URL. So if you go to dashboard, that'll tell you the URL for this instance.
I saw it right here.
Yep. So you just need to grab that
leather. Cool. All right. So I've got that. Let's jump into. Boom.
And if we just, I forget where, was it just in the app where we set up the client? Yeah, there.
Index. Yeah, index is where the provider is.
Yep.
There we go.
So that should now, if we save that, it's compiling, and if we go to the browser, we should have, we've now got my one to do on the hosted version.
Which is interesting because we're already separating by user. So before we just had one, we had all of the nodes, but we specified in the query. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's probably wrong, that query. Let's go and change that query.
Yeah.
I think what you're likely to do, if you're thinking of like an app that say, lists to-dos or has a stream of posts or something, your query you write from the client side, you really want that to just be, get me the 10 latest posts or something. You don't want it to have to go. You don't want to have to write code on the client side. You don't want to have to go who's the logged in user? Let me compile a query that's sensitive to the currently logged in user. You just want to have a query that's a declarative thing that says, hey, look, I just want to get all the to-dos.
Yeah.
So really we should just be, so we want to do query to-dos. Query to-do will be the query name.
Oh, right. That's right. Right?
I think it's just to-do, just query to-do. No S, yeah. If you have all the Apollo VS Code stuff as well, you can point it at this and get your
Oh, IntelliSense. Yes. Didn't we try this
and
and I failed miserably? Didn't
I
I
don't
have
know.
some issue?
I can tell we didn't try it though because there isn't a what's
You're
the
right.
name file there.
Yeah. Client.
I'd have to go and look at an example from the past.
Service. Client serve. I have like a bunch of these examples actually. I can't. Jake is gonna kill me. So Jake Dawkins, who like does a lot of the tooling stuff around the CLI, came on, did a mission briefing. We went through how to configure every type of project from like the command line in VS Code, and I can't remember how to do it. But I have the project Apollo tooling test projects. Oh wait, I'm in. Uh, um, so if I open one of these, I have a way to do this. So we got
pretty similar. It's just the lines of that
yeah.
file.
Where is?
I think it was just up,
oh
just a couple of lines up. There it is, Apollo config.
oh there it is. Thanks.
Sort of
here
yeah.
we go. So you do name. I can call it whatever. Service instead of local schema file. I can do endpoint. That's what it is.
Is it URL? Oh, you'll know better than me.
Yeah, I think it's endpoint. Why is this broken?
Let me see what I've got. I'm going to find one of my projects. I have client service name URL inside the service. Module exports, yeah.
And then for the endpoint, do I put the
URL of the instance, I think, should go in there.
Cool. Let's go get it. Oops.
So much more fun to have the IntelliSense when you're
really
typing stuff.
So now I should be able to go to my output. Where's my...
Do you have Apollo tools on?
Oh, I do. I definitely do. I thought I did. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
You do. So you can do Command P and reload the Apollo thing from the commands if you're in VS Code.
Yeah.
If that's
Command Shift P. Yeah. Ah!
Sorry.
Ah! Okay, hang on. Whoa. Command Shift P. Apollo.
Typing Apollo. Here we go. See what happens. Reload schema. It failed. Oh, you know what's going to fail here?
No, I don't think that's on you. I think maybe it's the Apollo. Do I not have the CLI? No, I do. I just used it earlier today. I don't know. Yay. Well, why is it not showing up here? That's what's should be showing up there as well. Okay. Well, that was fun. Yeah. I do not know. I mean, is this the same endpoint that it would do introspection from? Yep.
Well,
okay.
Just sends an introspection query there. So I think you're right. I think that was the VS Code extension, not the introspection query failing there. So I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I definitely think that was the extension failing.
I just went and found a example which looks a little different to yours, but I don't know how much that matters.
URL. It matters a lot.
Okay,
Well, that still failed though. Reload service not found. Yeah, no, it's running.
So mine is inside the client in the config. Mine's inside client.
Client
I
name.
use this client service. Yeah, okay. That's a bit what mine looks like.
Yeah.
Name service.
It's pretty similar.
Yeah, it looks pretty much the same. This is.
That's what the docs got too. Where was that? Where did I just see that? Oh, name
Yeah,
goes inside of that, but still.
Let's copy that.
Yeah.
Let's just copy that one and see if we can get that to work by just changing the URL. Yeah.
I like it.
That's how you program, right? Find an example, cut and paste.
That did not copy. Dun, dun, dun. All right. Command C.
Can you copy from those things? Does that work?
Maybe not. No, that's fun.
Yeah.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah.
So it was client, service, name, and that was my GraphQL app. And then it was a URL pointing to localhost. But in our case, we want to point here.
Yep.
We can also try it pointing at localhost because we have that running as well. So I'm curious to see if that works. All right. What's interesting is normally I see the little Apollo rocket thing here.
Yeah, that's what's normally there.
And
then you can click on it, let you know the status of the Apollo.
Yeah, exactly. But why am I not seeing Apollo here? And I would imagine it's because it's not running properly.
You need to do the streaming session again. We should stop this before you get in too much trouble.
Yeah, seriously. I'm going to reload the project really quick. Hey. Okay. Progress. Type user already exists.
This one I know. This is because the schema is inside the source directory and the Apollo dev extensions don't like that because it's looking inside the source directory for GraphQL files. It's introspecting the schema and looking for GraphQL files inside the source directory and going, hang on, I've got two user types here. So we just need to move that schema somewhere else in the project outside the source directory. I think that'll make everyone happy.
There we go.
Now,
hey, look at that.
So now we should get IntelliSense inside the GQL stuff, I think.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
Winning. So that's gone to, because we pointed the Apollo config thing at the cloud instance of Dgraph, it's gone and introspected the GraphQL schema at the cloud instance, got the schema, and now can do all the IntelliSense and all the rest of the fun.
And so now we can see it takes us from the top. Here's user, here's query to do, query user. And then we could just get all the IntelliSense all the way down. You can control spacebar to bring up your options. Very cool. Love it. Yeah. All right. There we go. Okay. So I think this...
All it took was actually looking at the docs and getting the options right.
Yeah, well, it took that and a restart because it just wasn't working until I restarted. Reloaded the window.
Yeah. Have you tried turning it off and turning it on? That's,
Yeah. That's classic, right? Okay, well, we got it. So here we go.
Okay,
so here we go.
I think the point where we were at, though, was that I think we were saying that in an app, we don't want to have to do something client-side to work out, generally, sometimes you do, but generally you don't want to have to, generate a query based on the current user, or
Yep.
try and work out what their permissions are and generate a query based on their permissions. So normally you just want to go, hey, I've got a logged in user. Let's just go and get the to-dos. And maybe we're filtering them, maybe we're ordering them by date or something. But realistically, we just want to go and get them. So we want this query. This is the query we want on our client side. We just want to go and get me all the to-dos. I'm going to lay them out on the screen. So if we run this now, we should get Michael's to-dos and Kurt's to-dos in the window.
Oh, I have to update the query because I'm still calling to the wrong path. We changed this to query to do here.
Yeah. Oh man, if we'd got that TypeScript thing working last time, it would have given us a little red squiggle, and we would have been happy.
Seriously though. Yeah.
So the query to do though, you've still got a mistake there because there's no longer to-dos inside query to do. It's just nothing there. Yeah, just delete that bit.
Oh right, it's just mapping
across the result. Yeah. That's why TypeScript's fun, because
that is why TypeScript is fun. Ugh. All right.
Particularly for GraphQL, because you get that data packet back and it's got all of the okay, what did we do wrong still?
I think I closed the terminal. Oh, I reloaded the window.
Oh yeah, you got to start it again.
That'll do it.
Yeah, so that's why I particularly like to use TypeScript with Apollo Client and GraphQL, because you run the query hook and you get typed.
Yeah.
You get data something, and you get IntelliSense. You get typing. If you go and do something like we just did, you get a little red squiggle where you've made a mistake. Just makes it so much easier to.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I prefer TypeScript.
Quickly, particularly at the start of an app like this, when you're iterating quickly and you're changing things, it stops you from making dumb mistakes that you've then got to spend half an hour looking at your code and going, where's the mistake here? Why is it not putting that on the screen? You just get a red squiggle and you're like, oh yeah, okay, sorry. And you just fix it. Alrighty, so we've got Michael's to-dos and Kurt's to-dos. Maybe we should put on the screen the username of the user who owns the to-do, so we can see in this who owns which one. So we drop back into VS Code. We just, I don't know, put somewhere who owns each one, so we can see that we're definitely getting both people's.
Yeah, I like that. Things. So we'll do, let's do an H4. Let's keep it semantic with our very complex application here. username.
And compile and run, and we should now have, so Kurt owns 2 of those to-dos and Michael owns 1 of those to-dos. Yeah. So what we want to do now is we want to set up the app so that it requires so that people can log in, and when Kurt's logged in, Kurt will only see Kurt's to-dos and Michael will only see Michael's to-dos.
I like it.
So in order to do this, I reckon the easiest way to explain this is if we drop into an Insomnia window, and then we can have kind of multiple tabs.
I like that. Yep, let's do that. So let me get Insomnia app running. Wrong place, Insomnia. All right. Okay.
Once again, point Insomnia at that endpoint.
Yep, but we have to update this.
Make a new request, and we'll do that to-dos, that query request to get the to-dos.
Okay.
First, if we can see that one, so we make it.
Let me go
here.
You
can even copy it.
Oh, oops. There we go. Okay. And then let's just go here. And then you said just bring in the other to-dos.
Grab the query we're using in the app, just so we got the right one. So that one, yeah.
Oh, I need
wrap it in query, etc.
Oops. Okay. All right. So let's run this.
We run that. We should get our list of 3 to-dos. Right.
There we go.
This is let's keep this around as the representation of the query we want to do in our app. And then we're going to just play around with a little bit to explain how auth works in Dgraph. So what we'll do is we'll write a query to get a user by searching for them by their username. Okay, so let's do that. You can do that in another tab, or just copy this out and do it again, whatever you like.
I'm just gonna do it from here. Is that cool?
Okay, yep. So let's just do this. Go get user, and so we're going to query user. We want to do query user, I think, just to show the
query user. Get Sorry.
Query user.
Yeah.
And that takes an argument, which is, this takes filter is the argument there.
I could just control space and stuff. And then filter is an object, right?
Yep. And we want the if we do control space in there, it'll give us, we want username, and then that's an object, EQ, yep. And then the user we want.
Let's see, Kurt.
Kurt, yep. And let's just get their username, whatever, we don't need that to do. It's just to make it simple. So if we run just that query.
Can I run just one? Let's see what happens when I do send. Let's send the first one. Oh, it's whichever one is highlighted.
Oh, yeah, cool. I didn't know that.
Me
cool.
Learn something new every day.
So this is a query that gets someone based on their username. So you know enough GraphQL to change this so that it takes a variable.
Yep.
And we can put in, so then it's a query that gets a person based on a variable. And we could pump in a different variable. So that's going to be string, yep. Yep, and then we add in a variable. So if we run this one now, we'll get the same result.
There we go.
And if we changed it to Michael, there'd be a query for Michael. So this query is a generic, like a function that gets some data based on this packet of GraphQL query variables at the bottom. So let's go just kind of keep that in our head for a second.
Yeah.
And then think about how an app often handles login and authorization and things. And what often happens is that you have some sort of authentication service, so a service that'll work out who you are.
Yep.
And that can be something bespoke that you write yourself, or it can be like a hosted option. I mean, you had Sam from Auth0 on a few weeks back. So Auth0 does this, and what happens is when you log in, you type in, I'm Kurt, and here's my password, and press send. That sends that packet of data to your authentication provider. Your authentication provider then says, is this correct? Works out, is this the right username and password? And if it is, it normally sends back some sort of token to verify that that's correct. And then your front end passes that token around saying, hey, Kurt's now requesting this page, Kurt's now requesting that page, and the back checks that that's that token's valid, basically.
Yep.
And the way this often happens is with JWT. So if we drop into a web browser, we can have a bit of fun because JWTs have this really nice website. If you go to jwt.io, so this is the web page about the JWT RFC. And if you scroll down just a little bit, there's this really cool little debugger thing here where you can actually like type in a JWT. So you can type in the data. So a JWT is just a packet of JSON data. And then as you type in, it'll change the encoded box on the left. So if we like delete something, like let's delete the name or field or something in that payload data just near where your mouse is, and the thing on the left changes because it's the actual JWT. So this is like a little editor where you can build a JWT and then grab the JWT out. So this is kind of what your authentication provider would do. When you log in as Kurt, it would build one of these JWTs that says this person is Kurt. Here's a couple of claims about Kurt, and encode it as a JWT and send it back. So what we're going to do, you're a step ahead. Can we add one more line
and
above
make that
Kurt?
Claims.
Yeah, we need an expiry date here because the JWT, we're going to check the expiry date inside Dgraph. So it's just EXP is the key, and then we just need a big number.
That's
so
right.
Just as a number, not as a string though. I think it just needs to be a number. If you just type in a bunch of nines or a bunch of numbers, or whatever, and then hold your mouse over it, it'll tell you what that date is in the window.
So that's 1970.
You need to go further.
Oh, way further. Oh. There we go.
Now.
There we go.
Oh my goodness, that is 1179. So that expiry date is definitely going to be valid for the duration of this call. Okay.
I'm gonna leave it in my will to my kids, so they can leave it to their kids.
Down through the generations. Okay, and then let's put put a new object. So after that, we'll put an object in, and let's call it, I don't know, my to-do claims or whatever you like. Yeah, you can call it anything you want.
I was gonna call it claims. Is that cool?
Yeah, it can be anything. And then put username Kurt inside there. Right. So we've now got a valid JWT. So if this is the kind of JWT that you'd get from your authentication provider. If Kurt logs in, it would send back a token, which will be this encoded token on the left, that tells you that one of the claims of this token is that the username of the person who holds the token is Kurt. But then if we look at that little squiggle there inside the claims, it's a JSON object that says the username is Kurt. And if we go back to our Insomnia window, we had a query about users that was parameterized by a set of query variables that's exactly the same structure. And so this is how we do auth in Dgraph, is we treat the JWT as a GraphQL set of GraphQL query variables. And then you can write GraphQL queries that tell you what you're allowed to access based on the claims that you hold in a JWT. So that's how auth works, is that this query that you've written that looked like it was just a query to get a user by their username, we can actually just turn that into a rule that says, hey, you're only allowed to view the details of users if you happen to hold a JWT saying that you're that user. So that's how auth works in Dgraph, is we take the JWT, treat it as a set of query variables. You can write rules as GraphQL themselves, and then we push the two together, and that lets you work out what you can and can't see in the graph. So if we take query you had in Insomnia, we can then turn that into an access control rule for the graph and say you can only see your own data. So that rule there, so that's a rule that takes a username. We did use username in the JWT, didn't we?
We sure did.
I think we. Yep. So if we copy that query and go over to the schema in /GraphQL, we can now change the user type. So we're going to add something to the user type. And this is not going to be the funnest dev experience because there's no syntax highlighting or anything in this window. But
we can do it.
I reckon we can do it. So there's a directive which is auth. So it's @auth.
Quick question. Could I do this in VS Code and then just copy it in?
Yeah, but it's still not the best. It's still not the best experience. I reckon we'll right here. But,
I was just asking if that's like,
And then the directive, let's put a new line inside those braces, inside the brackets. Yeah. So this auth directive tells you how to treat this type with auth, and it takes a bunch of arguments, and those arguments are about query, add, update, and delete mutations. So we're going to add a query one. So the key we're going to use is query. And that takes an object, and then you can build all kinds of complex auth rules, but we're going to just do the one that just adds a rule. So the object then is rule, and this rule will take a GraphQL query as an argument. So what you'll need to do to make, because it's a multi-line thing, you're going to need to do 3 rabbit ears in a row, because that's I'm about to put in a multi-line string thing in GraphQL. And we end it with a multi-line string, and then paste the query in there.
Boom.
So it's no fun highlighting, but what this says is that the type user, you can only query it if it happens to be that you're the user, if that you carry a token that tells you what username you are. So you'll, no matter what, after we add this, no matter what way you try and query users, you'll only be able to see the one that you have the token to see. So there's one more thing we need to add here now, is we need to go down to the excuse me, the bottom of this file and tell Dgraph what JWTs to trust. Because
that's right.
it's not going to be any JWT, it's got to be a JWT that we trust. So if we just put a couple of new lines, there's a bit of magic. One of the cool things about /GraphQL is that the way you admin the instance is actually through GraphQL. So under the hood, this is actually a GraphQL mutation to the admin part of your instance, which is then changing the thing. And the process that's going to happen is that this stuff that we're now typing into the schema will eventually be part of the arguments to that mutation. So when you set your schema, you'll be able to set arguments that do the auth and whatever with it. At the moment, that's not part of the mutation, so we have to just put it in the schema file, which is a little bit ugly, but it still works.
Yeah.
Okay. So space, and then it's capital D, Dgraph dot authorization. So this is just a special comment. This is a capital A, sorry, for authorization.
Just a capital A.
I think it matches this string exactly. And so this is a magic comment that'll tell Dgraph how to interpret the JWTs. So the first argument to this is going to be the header that we expect the JWT in.
That's right.
We can put this in whatever header we like. That doesn't matter. We just make up a name.
Got it.
So we can call it, I don't know, my app auth or something.
Oh,
I don't know. No dot.
No dot, just a space. Got it. Oh, I thought you were saying authorization is. I always call my headers authorization.
Yeah.
So
let's call it authorization. That's fine. That's the normal standard. And then the next, so space, and the next thing is going to be what key inside that claims object to look for our packet of GraphQL variables that are going to help us to resolve our auth. So in this case, I think we had it as claims. Didn't we? In the JWT. And then the next bit is our JWT gets signed. So when the authentication provider builds the JWT, it signs it. And there's a whole bunch of ways you can sign that JWT. In this case, this JWT, if you look at the very top of the screen there, it says ALG HS256. So this is using symmetric key cryptography with a passphrase to sign the JWT. You could also use public-private key asymmetric cryptography, but we've got this. So let's just copy this. We could have made this secret whatever we like.
But
actually, let's change it.
This is what we want, right? Let's change this. Yeah, we'll call this.
We changed it. You'll notice on the left-hand side, the little bit in blue will change as you're typing, because that's the signature it's computing from the secret.
Okay.
So that's our secret key. Algorithm is HS256, right? So then we go back to the Dgraph window, and the next two arguments are the algorithm we're going to use, which was HS256, and then the key. The key's got to be wrapped in quotes, though, because it could have spaces and all kinds of stuff in it.
That's a good call. That makes a lot of sense. Cool.
As long as we don't add any syntax errors there, if we press upload schema. Okay, so now the schema has been uploaded. So we've now changed the Dgraph instance so that it's not gonna respond. It's not gonna let you query out authors unless you have the right JWT. So if we go back to our Insomnia window now. Oh yeah, we could even just reload there. I don't know what we've done there.
Well, it says cannot query to do of undefined. Oh, data is probably undefined because
there's part of this is undefined because we're not getting it back.
Yeah.
It's null.
Yeah,
so let's go to Insomnia and do it through Insomnia.
That's a good call.
And just check that. So if we now go to let's just go to list to dos, because this will show what just happened there. So there'll be a bunch of error messages here. So if we scroll down the bottom, we didn't add any protections to dos. We just added some protections to authors, right?
Yeah.
So what's happening is it's running that to do it's trying to get on the left-hand side, if you look at the query, it's trying to get the username, but we don't have authorization to query a user. So that's going to come back as null. Then GraphQL is going to kick in and go, oh, users is required, because in your schema it had the exclamation mark after it. It's going to go, well, this to-do object I just got is an error, so I'm just going to blat it. And so we ended up with just a bunch of nulls from our query because of the author. Now, if we were writing a proper app, we would have handled some of that in better ways, but that's why that failed. So maybe let's just write another query to just query all the authors now. So we just query all the authors. And if we just go query user and just get the username. And if we run that one, we should just get nothing.
Yeah, just empty array.
We just got nothing.
Yeah.
So what we need to do now is, if we want to run this and actually get a result, we need to give it a valid JWT. So if we go to, we go here, our header was, what was our header?
Authorization.
And the value, if you go to the JWT.io, there's the value, is the JWT. So that's the JWT our authentication provider would have handed us. So if we now run the query with that one, we should get just Kurt. Whoa. And if we went back to the JWT window and changed the JWT to be Michael, you're still going to get some errors here because
we haven't protected.
You're going to get the error.
Yeah, we're not filtering. We're still trying to get them all, but I don't get the ones from you.
The Michael ones are just going to be null here.
Yeah.
So what happened now is we've now got a valid JWT that authenticates you as Kurt. If we try and query the users, we just get Kurt. If we tried to query the to-dos, we're still going to get all the to-dos because we don't have any authorization that says you can't. In that schema, there's nothing tells you you can't.
Yeah.
So all that's happening is the GraphQL is kicking in and going, oh, well, you couldn't see the user. So we're squashing this to-do. So that's nothing to do with auth. That part's just GraphQL doing its bit. So in the data there on the right-hand side, you should have got all of Kurt's ones and then a null for Michael's one because the data got squashed, I think. So what'll happen?
Yep.
Yeah, so you get one null.
Exactly what happened. Let me take a guess here. Sorry, if I might. If we created a new rule for to-dos that was based off of a username, added that to our schema, we could then keep the same query to-do, but it would now know that it's only in relation to for whoever the username matches, and that would be our split, our multi-tenancy, if you will, like our ability to kind of segregate that data.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
We add a rule to-dos to say, hey, who can see what to-dos? So if we write another query down here, which will be something like query get to-dos or whatever you want to call it, and it's going to do this thing. It's going to take a username as an argument. You're going to use that username inside the query to work out which to-dos you're allowed to see, and if we add that back into our so query to-do though, right?
Yep. And then here we want filter. Let me see if I can get this.
Actually, not because to-dos. Remember to do. So we're going to have to do this couple of steps
in reverse.
Because the to-do. If you look at the query up the top, we're going to filter once we get down to the username, not at the to-do level. So the way this is going to work is if we just do query to-do, so query to-do here.
I'm just going to copy this then for now.
Boop. Put that down there if you want. And then it's on the user, you're going to do the filter.
Oh, right.
I'm going to show you some magic about Dgraph as well here.
Oh, I love... That seems interesting.
Just username EQ, dollars username.
There we go.
So when you're writing, so if you think about this query we just wrote, if you were, this comes back to this distinction between a graph query language and GraphQL as a language for APIs. If you had an API that you were writing with a bunch of resolvers for this thing down the bottom, your intention for this query is that I only want to get the to-dos where a particular username is attached to it at some point deeper down in the graph.
Yeah.
And to do that normally, you then have to like take the arguments at the top of the graph, and your query to do resolver would get more complex, or you'd have to be doing some weird crap with the context or something like that, where you're digging into the arguments deeper down and then affecting the result higher up. So that stuff you'd kind of have to handle. Whereas Dgraph, because it's a graph database, has that kind of stuff built in. So this query as it stands, if we just ran this, it would do the same thing as we just saw at the top. Basically, it would grab all the to-dos, and then it would go and find their users, and it would filter out the usernames that are not equal to. Whereas what we can do, because it's a graph database, is we can say, hang on, what we really meant is this constraint that holds deeper down in the graph, we meant that to constrain the whole query. We meant this to be we meant this to be a constraint on the results that I want all up. And what we do for this, after query to do, there's a little directive we can add at the top level after query to do. So if you go up on line 25, and the directive is cascade, CAS.
Okay.
And what that is that, I wonder why you didn't get syntax help for that.
It's interesting. Unknown directive. Because I guess it's not a. Oh wait. Well, yeah, no, because these.
Let's try running it and see what happens. It might fail. We may be running a version on your instance. Oh yeah, cool. I know that worked. I don't know why. Maybe Insomnia didn't introspect the schema properly. I don't know.
Yeah, that's weird.
You got nothing because you've got the JWT for Kurt and you've got the username for Michael. So, there you go, refreshed and it's happy now.
There we go.
I wonder what happened. So if you change the username in the variables to Kurt, you'll now just get Kurt's to-dos. No, I don't know what's happening now. Something has gone crazy. Go. So, and this mode is the mode we always run auth rules in. We always say what you wrote for the auth rule meant I want all the restrictions inside this query.
Oh, so I didn't even put together that this said Michael. We got no results. I'm like, wait, that's not working. But it's because the claims username is Kurt. So of course we got
JWT. None. Yeah, we've got a JWT that says that we're running this query as Kurt.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
So now we've got this get to-dos is now a rule that tells you which to-dos you're allowed to access. You're allowed to access these two to-dos, and that's all.
That's so cool.
All this JWT allows you to access. So if we now took this and put it as a rule in the schema in the same way we did for the other one. So it's the same thing, at auth query.
Oh, I hit tab. Oh, don't do that.
Yeah, don't. Told you it wasn't friendly. And then paste the rule in there.
I'm getting the hang of this.
So now if we update that schema.
This is so cool.
So we've now said that you can only access to-dos if it happens that the to-do is linked to a user who's got the same username as the claim that you have in your thing. Did we just make our app work?
Yeah, kind of. Like, yeah, because there's no JWT. So yes, it's working because we have no results.
Here and just check, just verify. If we run that top query in Insomnia that just goes query to do, we've got the Kurt JWT. That one should now.
Yep.
Yeah, that one just gives us all Kurt's to do. So this is now the query we have in our app. And all we need to make the app work is we've got to pass the header. So we just got to pass that JWT in the authorization header. Just be careful because sometimes you won't get things after the dots. It's annoying.
All right, there we go. So let's go add this. So, oops. So we can add that.
Just add it into the
headers, right? It takes the headers. Yes, it does.
And the JWT, and of course, in a real app, this would be an object you'd ping from.
But look at that.
Hey, winning. we only get Kurt's to-dos.
That is wild to me. I'm sorry, I just want to take a second to pause right there about how wild that is. So the cool thing about this is it's powered by JWTs. JWTs are like the most prevalent form of pretty much authentication that there is. Like you said, you can create them yourself. I've set this up many times, off of creating my own. You can use a service like Auth0 or Netlify Identity, or the list goes on. But there's a bunch of services that will give you a JSON Web Token for a user.
Yeah.
Yeah, which makes the integration so easy.
This work, you just need to get the claims. You just need to set what claims you want your app to tell us about. So that could be just their username, or be some other claims as well that they hold. And you can then set the rules to be any graph query that you like. So it can be as deep as you like. It can have multiple branches. It can do all kinds of stuff.
That's so wild.
It can be anything.
So I have a quick question though. So one thing that you'll experience often is like role-based authorization. Where like someone will have an array of scopes. So like, let's say I want to be able to see all to-dos if I'm an admin, or it's just my name. Like, what would that look like?
Yeah, so I'm a step ahead of you there. So that's lucky.
Again, not planned.
So we do have. Yeah, lucky you didn't ask some horrible question where I was like, "No, Kurt, come on." So we do have role-based stuff as well. So there's two kinds of rules you can add to your schema. One kind of rule is the graph search rule, which, like I said, can be anything that you can express using Dgraph's GraphQL query language. You can express a rule like. The other one is the role-based ones, which for the moment we really only have a really simple version of, but we can make it work in this instance. If we let's jump back to the JWT, just to see what that would look like in a JWT.
Yeah.
So what it would look like is, so you've come along, you've logged in, the app's realized, oh, this is Kurt, that's his username, and Kurt is playing a particular role. He's the admin of the site. So let's put another claim in there. Is what would happen in your provider would say, hey, Kurt's got another claim called, I don't know, role or status, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Works.
And let's make Kurt the admin. And this can be, again, this can just be anything. This can be whatever values and keys make sense for your app. And so we got a new JWT. And so that JWT now contains two claims: the claim that your username is Kurt and the claim that your role is admin. And at the moment, that's not going to change anything because we haven't told Dgraph anything about this.
And our old token would technically still work right now because it's only looking for username.
Yeah, so this token will still work because in that variables packet, it's just going to peel out the username.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is tell Dgraph that admins can also see all the posts. So if we go back to /GraphQL, and again, I'm going to apologize because this is not going to.
That's fine. Let's do it.
So what we want to do on the the auth rule for query. So after query, we've just put in a single rule, but there's a bunch of other stuff you can put in. You can put in logical connectives. You can put in multiple rules. You can have all kinds of deep, fancy rules that conjoin different things. So we want a rule that says either you're the admin or this this query hold.
Yeah.
So the argument now is, instead of rule, we're going to wrap this rule in an or. So that'll be or. Or takes a list of.
That makes sense.
Or list of objects, and each of those objects is then another rule, which could be as complicated as you like. So let's get this at the right spot though. So after
the three rabbit ears, right?
We're going to need to wrap rule in
or
curly braces. Yeah, so it's wrapped in an or, but then each one of these is going to be an object. So rule needs an object around it, and then at the bottom. Instead where you are now, that, and then comma, and then we're going to put in another rule. So we need two curly braces on that blank line. That's just going to be rule, colon, and this rule is going to look a little bit different, but it's just a string. So it's string, curly braces, curly brace, and then the variable we just had was, what was it? Was it roll?
Yes, we called it roll.
Yeah, so roll, dollars roll because it's a variable
Oh, oops.
in same as you used in the GraphQL queries.
Got it.
Dollars roll, colon,
Admin.
space. Same syntax as you would use for the
So
GraphQL.
that equals.
And yeah, except you're gonna have to escape this slash.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm going to almost guarantee that we made a syntax error in here somewhere.
Probably, because we just did a lot.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Oh, let's update and see what happens. It'll tell us.
This is not a valid rule.
Oh, closing curly brace. There's only one closing curly. So just
needs to be
the final.
Yeah, just before the close quote there, right?
Yeah, that's a good sign. That means it parsed all of the rest of the structure and it just failed on that string. So
hey.
Mistake. That's pretty good. So now if we grab that new JSON web token.
Yeah, let's do that. Use that, I'll be able to get all the to-dos.
Yeah, now you're the admin. Oh, except that I just noticed a thing.
Oh.
We wrote in thing, that's capital A admin, I think we used in there. Yeah.
Fixed it. I've got my token. Let's make sure again. Let's bring up Insomnia. Go to our headers. Oops. Whoa. That's weird. All right. Okay. We've got a new header. Let's list some to-dos.
You should get all of them now, including Michael's to-dos.
Nope.
You didn't. Let's kill the username part because you're failing because you can't see the user. That admins can kill username. So in the list to-dos query, let's kill the username bit. Or we could copy the or thing into.
Is it because I didn't put roll? Oh no, that wouldn't matter. This is
this is just.
Yeah,
that's a nothing in this one. It's because that our auth says that you can only see usernames if you've got the right thing.
Which
we
makes
haven't
sense.
said that admin.
Yeah.
You can see users, so we would have to change that as well to make the app
work.
The
rule for users as well. We would have to say you either have to be the user or admin. But if we went and made that fix, we could add this back, and then boom, it would all work.
Yeah, and that's the same problem is going to occur in the app is that we're going to get a null in one of our to-dos because we couldn't see the user.
Then let's do this. Let's go. I think we should just add the rule, right? Let's just do it.
So we can just do the same thing. So we just go to the user.
Or, which is an array of objects. So then we come here. Yeah, here's our last one. So that we could do a comma, and then we need a closing brace, and then we do the new rule. And that should do it.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, let's find out.
Yep.
Hey, yo.
Yeah. So now if we drop into Insomnia or into the app or whatever, we should be okay.
Oh, beautiful.
Kurt the admin.
There we go. Cool. So now if we bring the token, we need the token into the app.
Yeah, right, because that's the one with the claims.
Yeah, we should get all of them, all the users. Or all the to-dos, I mean. Or we could get all the users. At this point, we can get everything. We're admins. We can do whatever we want.
Whatever you like. Yeah.
It's just, there we go. Look at that.
There we go, done.
This is so cool. Like, it's hard to, put into words how immensely powerful the authorization becomes through this querying fashion. It's hey, here's the representation of the exact data structure query that I'm after, but only if this part down here, way near the bottom, matches. And I get that you could do it, like we saw, if it's not cascading, where that affects you get back the to-dos, but then it just strips out the underlying properties. And that's actually a good flexibility because there's a lot of situations where that might be the behavior that you want.
Yeah, you could think, for example, get me the users and all of their posts with the GraphQL, all the to-dos with the GraphQL keyword in them. Some of those will have things in them and some of them will be null. You don't necessarily want to squash the authors just because they had no
Right.
to-dos with that thing in them. You might still put them on the screen, but just say there's no
Yeah, that's a
there's no
good
value.
point too. Yeah. Huh.
And that cascade thing can live at any point in the query. So it's basically saying from this point below, treat it like this.
Yeah.
So that's what there's a couple of ways in Dgraph where you can treat those things more like a graph query than whereas in like normal GraphQL you'd have to write some code
Yeah.
to switch between these behaviors or have extra arguments at your top level or something like that. Whereas in this, because it's a graph, it's powered underneath by a graph, we can treat those things in a little bit different ways.
Graphs, I'm telling you, it's the future. Yeah. Like I'm laughing, but like in all honesty, graphs have completely redefined uh, a lot of the ways that we do things from relational data to how we understand and request or work with the data. Um, yeah, the connections, things are definitely just a bunch of nodes connected together. Like I don't know, there's a metaphor for life in there. Point being is that like networks, graphs, it's like it makes more sense than being flat and um, like lists and rows. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Even just shallow graphs, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a hugely complicated graph
No.
for like you say, for that understanding as a graph. Like even just in this circumstance, having a graph, even just with authors and their to-dos, just kind of makes sense, right?
Yep.
It's how it's how your mental model would process that graph, process that app. It doesn't
Exactly.
really process it as unrelated block boxes of things, to-dos and authors. Your mental model is about the connection between those elements. So that's why GraphQL works really nicely for so many different kinds of apps.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it also has all that fun stuff. Like when I'm laying it out in my UI, I don't want to write code to lay it out. I just want to go,
That's
you
for
get me
query.
the data structure like this that I want, and then I'm going to work out how to lay it out.
Yeah.
It makes a really nice um, sort of declarative way of getting at least some part of your app going. It's really about how do I want to get my, like, what does my data structure look like? Not how do I want to get it, but just what does it look like that I want to lay out on my screen. So, and
Yeah.
then you jump into React, and it's largely again largely declarative. You've got a bit of hooking up stuff to do there, but it's kind of fun because of that part, I think.
Yeah, it's really fun. I actually used that analogy for someone who didn't, someone who's not very technical. They were asking me about my job and like GraphQL, and I kind of didn't really know how to explain it to them. So I was just saying like when it comes to like getting information from different places, a lot of times it's left to the app developer to kind of put those ingredients together and build what they need from it. Whereas like GraphQL is more like takeout, where you just check off exactly what you want, and then that's what's brought to you. So like as opposed to you using like three services to bring you ingredients and then you cook that into your dinner, uh, GraphQL is just ordering your dinner and having it brought straight to you. Yeah.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, right. Like that's kind of the difference. Like in a REST world and when everything is just separate and flat, it's up to you to figure out how that's all supposed to come together. And yeah, yeah, it's really interesting. This is awesome. So like, is there anything else you want to talk about or mention or go over?
I think I mean, there's lots of docs. I mean, if you go to the dashboard, there's links to the docs and whatever that,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
there's a bunch of things there. The docs, oh, that's the Dgraph docs. Whoops.
Oops, wrong
If you
ones.
go back to Flash GraphQL, that's not the GraphQL part of the docs. That one, yeah, the middle one. I wonder why we
GraphQL
probably
guide
shouldn't link to the other.
or API?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
GraphQL guide,
Ah,
yeah.
nice. Very cool. Okay.
These docs are getting fancified because my
Ooh.
layout skills.
I don't know.
um,
I'm digging it.
there's more than enough information there to learn about. And there's a quick start guide there for anyone who picked up um, some credits from you about to get onto slash GraphQL and give it a
Oh
go. There's a
yeah.
quick start guide with pretty much the schema that we just used and sort of walks through similar sort of process.
Yeah, we didn't even touch
Um,
on like search, like which is its whole own thing and very powerful, you know.
so we could, in this, for example, in this app, if you've got lots of to-dos, you could have a little search box there that is filtering your to-dos based on keyword search,
Yeah.
or we could have them tagged, or I guess all kinds of ways you could be. We could have dates. We could order them by dates or date they're supposed to be completed, and
Yeah.
you could do all kinds of stuff. The other big thing that we didn't talk about, and we just don't have time to talk about, is the custom resolvers on the left. So you can also,
Oh.
as well as having the graph capability that Dgraph gives you, you can add custom queries, custom mutations, and even custom fields into your type that then return a hosted product that hits an external endpoint, which can be, what's the example here? Oh yeah, so you could hit Twitter, given a username, you can hit Twitter.
Very wild.
So your internal type, this example is just a query, but for example, your actual type definition in the GraphQL thing could have a custom field that actually hits Twitter and pulls down some data, or hits
Right.
a service that you deploy yourself, um, and pulls the data into the graph. So then Dgraph can kind of process its local data plus the data that it's pulling in from the other services. And you can do fun stuff with headers and
Oh wow.
tokens and well, because
Yeah.
you'll need to, for the Twitter, you'll need to pass in a token
Yep.
to get to the dev API. And you can also mix in multiple. Those things don't have to be REST style APIs. You can have a
Right.
GraphQL
Yeah.
API there as well.
That's
So
so
you can kind of
cool.
mix in types from another GraphQL API. The one I always like to use is the GitHub API. So
Yeah.
you can write an app that sort of integrates your little bit of local processing plus the GitHub API, and you can go back and forth between the two really nicely. And
That's very
then
cool.
so it's not quite so that is not quite federation like you talked about in your
Yeah.
talk before,
Yeah.
because federation allows you to go into the GitHub API and back out again into your API, for example. But then you can play fun games with this and Apollo Federation and all other
Oh
kinds of
my
stuff. So there's
goodness.
all
Oh, yeah.
one of the best things about the GraphQL ecosystem is there's so many fun things you can plug in and make work. Even like the dev experience we had before, where you get the Apollo VS Code extension, and
Yeah.
suddenly you've got syntax highlighting and whatever inside your GraphQL string in your in your VS Code window
Yeah.
that's gone and introspected schema from some cloud service, and you're getting all that kind of stuff.
I
So
was just
there's
thinking,
really nice
like,
as well
yeah,
as the other.
exactly. And like honestly, like this is still very useful and like even in a federated like API. So let's say you had an API that had venues and then those venues were data within Dgraph, right? And that's like one of your schemas that you have federated. And maybe you want to check what the weather is for a given venue and have that returned from here. And you could do this custom in here with a weather API, and return that data as well. Just
That's kind of one of the nice things about federation as well, is those services can evolve in their own way
Yep.
and then expose what they've evolved to as part of the federation. So they don't you don't have to kind of expose all the changes. All the changes don't have to be part of the federation. They're kind of local in the
Exactly. Yeah.
you know and then the federation can use them, which is I guess that's the whole point, isn't it? Right? The
Yeah.
federation's about breaking it up into your individual units of work,
Yep.
and not having some massive thing. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it's like that's that domain-driven design, but with GraphQL
yeah.
instead of REST APIs. Yeah. This is so awesome. Mind-boggling stuff here. You all are doing fantastic work. By the way, this just keeps getting better and better. So kudos to the Dgraph team. Um, Amazing.
So that slash GraphQL there, I think you send out a link, you can pick up some of Kurt's
Yep.
tweeted you or some credits. Kurt's got an amazing amount of credits. We've Kurt's going to be running in production for years with
Yeah.
his credits.
I'm about to get rich.
But if you claim those credits, I think he gave you a much smaller number of credits, and you'll be able to come in and check it out, and
Yeah.
you'll certainly be able to kick the tires around quite a bit with
Oh
the
my
amount of credits
goodness.
that
You'd be able to kick
he's given
tires
you.
around over 10,000 times. So I think it's a lot of kicking. Yeah.
And we're super keen to get feedback. Like if people want to pick it up and use it and tell us which bits they liked and which bits
Yeah.
they thought were missing, yeah, we're real keen to engage with anyone who wants to, you know, reach out to us.
Awesome. And over the next few weeks, I'll also be dishing out some more as the weeks come up. Maybe I'll do some fun things on Twitter and hand out some more credits. And yeah, again, you're always welcome to come back and join us for more streams. We love having you on. Such good stuff. I love this. I'm sure everyone else is loving it too. But yeah, we should definitely do that. When I release the YouTube video, I'll also release another big old chunk of credits. And yeah, we'll keep the ball rolling and get some users kicking those tires.
Awesome. Yeah, fantastic. It's great fun to come on these streams. It's kicked me off doing some pair programming with
Yes.
a colleague in India as well. We sit there, get on VS Code and do like an hour a couple of times a week. It's really
That's
good.
awesome. Yeah.
It's a nice. Yeah.
I love to hear that. I am a big pair
So that's
programming advocate, and so streaming just like it just really jives very well with me. It's like pair programming. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's really. I haven't done much of that with the VS Code extension before, but now I'm
Yeah.
loving it. Yeah, it's really good
When it
fun.
works, it's great, and when it doesn't, it drives you bonkers. Me anyway. It's like, oh, you know. But yeah, it works. It works 100% of the time, 80% of the time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I guess that wraps it up, right? Like seems like a real good stopping point to me. Unless you had anything else you wanted to cover, any last burning desires or anything.
No, I think we're basically at the end
That's
of the
true.
time. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, like you said, it's good point.
Yeah, it is. Well, once again, thank you for joining us. So yeah, and thank you to everyone at Dgraph. This is amazing slash GraphQL. So I'm going to be doing some follow-up content about this as well. I have a project that I'm going to be starting working on, so I'm going to be using Dgraph for that. So it'll be really cool. I'm going to be doing some Auth0 and Dgraph stuff and see how all of that comes together for a project that I'm working on. So it should be really interesting and cool. I'm excited.
Awesome. Happy to hear about
Oh,
that when you get
absolutely. Yeah,
started.
I'll make sure to keep you posted. I'm sure I'll actually bother you with about a gazillion questions. So be warned.
That's all right. That's all right.
Awesome. Okay. So with that, we're going to bid you all a farewell. We're going to get going. Michael's actually going to get off to his day. He's in Australia, so it's morning for him. I'm going to go off to my evening. It's nighttime for me, so I'm going to go to bed soon. Yeah, and we're going to call it here. But thanks again for joining us. Another great stream of mission briefing. Another great partnership here with Dgraph. Thank you all again one last time. And with that, we'll see you all later.